This video will serve as an introduction to our nomenclature unit, give you kind of an overview of the 4 different naming types and how to determine them. In the nomenclature unit, we're really focused on just 2 questions: how to make a name from a formula and how to make a formula from a name. That's it. So 4 different naming types, and this is the question you'll be answering every time. So in general, every year, here are the things kids recommend. It's not hard, it just takes time. You need to do a lot of practice, do the videos, do the practice. This unit is one where I think it always differentiates my students who work hard and my students that don't, in that it's not a hard concept, it just takes time. So if you come and go, naming is really hard, I would say, no, it's not that hard, it just takes time. So put the time in and you'll be fine. So there's 4 types of naming structures that we're going to go through. So depending on the type of bond or the type of elements that are in the compound, there's a different kind of set of rules for how we name it. So if there's an ionic bond, we name it one way. So if it's making those salt crystals. If it's covalent, making the molecules, we name it one way. And then within covalent, if it's organic, meaning it has hydrocarbons, we name it one way. And then if it's acid, we name it another way. So basically in every case, we have to figure out what type of bond it is first, and then figure out how to name it. So this first video is really on how do you determine the type of bond. Well, for ionic, you'll be able to tell that it's ionic because it has a metal. It's the only naming type that's going to have a metal or those ions, the cations and anions. For the covalent or the molecules, they're going to have all nonmetals. For acids, they will always start with hydrogen. So every time you have a compound that starts with hydrogen, it's going to fall in that acid category. And then organics are what's called hydrocarbons. So they will always be compounds that have carbon, hydrogen, and then sometimes oxygen in them. All my compounds are neutral. So these are all normal, like how do I make 8s? It's just a question of how they make 8s to what type they are. So here are some examples that we're going to talk through. So in these examples, I'm kind of looking for 4 things. Is there a metal? Because if it's a metal, it's ionic. Does it start with an H? Because if it starts with an H, it will be an acid. Is it a hydrocarbon? Meaning it just has carbons, hydrogens, and oxygen, because then it would be organic. And if it's none of those things, it's just a simple molecule. So when I look at my list, step 1, that Si2Br6, if I look at that, no metal, doesn't start with an H, not a hydrocarbon, so that one is going to be a covalently bonded one, and I'm going to name it based on it being a simple molecule. Okay, so that's covalent. For the next one, when I look at that, FeNO3, iron, right away, boom, it's a metal, so that one is going to be ionic in terms of how I name it. Next one, if I look at it, I see it starts with a hydrogen, and anything that starts with a hydrogen is going to end up being an acid in terms of how I name it. And then the last one, I just have carbon and hydrogen and oxygen in the bond and nothing else, so that is going to fit under my organic naming structure. Okay? So throughout this unit, we essentially are going to learn 4 naming structures: ionic, covalent, acids, and organics. And that's one way to determine how we're doing it and which one's which. Now from name to formula, this one says acid in it, so I would name it like an acid. This one, if I look at it, it starts with chlorine, and then it has oxygen, no metal, not a hydrogen, not carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So that would be one of those covalents again. I would name it like a simple molecule. Okay. Next one, sodium nitrate. Sodium is a metal, and as soon as I see any metals, I can name that as ionic. Okay. And the last one's octene. You guys don't know just looking at that yet that that's organic, but that is essentially the organic naming structure. So we'll come back around to that. So this video is just an intro to how to determine the types of bonds. Again, ionic will have metal, covalent will have, ionic will have metal, organic will have carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Acids will start with H's, and if none of those are true, then it's just a simple covalent, and we'll name it like a molecule. That's it for your intro video. Go ahead and do the practice and have a nice night.